Good day, I am Ray Villaluz and today, I will be talking about the equity theory by John Stacey Adams. Equity theory calls for a fair balance to be struck between an employee's inputs, for example, their hard work, skill level, acceptance, enthusiasm, etc., and their outputs like salary, benefits, intangibles such as recognition, and more. Basically, equity theory aims for equal pay for equal amount of work. Moreover, equity theory is a motivation theory that is focused on employee motivation that is mostly determined by their sense of fairness at work. Employees keep a mental record of their input and output and uses that record to compare their inputs and outputs to others. They use it a motivational or even a demotivational factor for them to work based on what they compare it for. More on that later. First, let us know about the proponent of the equity theory. In 1960, a behavioral psychologist, John Stacey Adams, established equity theory. It is a process model of motivation that focuses on the reward we receive and compares it to our sense of contribution, which affects our motivation to do work. This theory considers the concept of equality and fairness as well as the importance of comparison of yourself to others. Now, let's focus on the meaning of input and output on this theory. Inputs are the actions given by an employee such as their work, their skill set, their experience, etc. And outputs are what the employee gains from giving their input. For example, their pay, benefits received and many more. These two factors can motivate or demotivate an employee as they tend to compare their output to their own input as well as they compare their output to another employee's output with the consideration of their input. For this theory to be implemented properly, employees and supervisors should aim to strike a balance between what they provide and what they receive, equal pay for equal work. This balance is based on their satisfaction with their own balance on their own and their colleagues' input and output. To put it in a mathematical sense, equity is equal to the outputs of a person divided by the same person's inputs. And what they get from that can be, and certainly will be, compared to others. For those employees who perceive inequity in their outputs will change and be motivated to change their inputs, as well as those who perceive inequity in their inputs will change their outputs to restore balance. Keep in mind that employees will always aim to strike a balance between what they provide and what they receive. An inequity that occurs in a workplace or in a specific employee, that employee will become demotivated if their outputs are lower than their inputs, and the same will happen if their inputs are lower than their outputs. It will create a cascading effect around his or her colleagues and demotivates them to work. Now, here are the propositions of equity theory. But first, let us know about a referent. A referent is what the employee utilizes to make comparison of. And there are 4 types of reference. First, we have the self inside. Second, we have the outside of the self-referent. Then we have others on the side. And lastly, the others outside. The self-inside referent is a person's experience within their current company. This is when the employee compares their output to their input. It first deals with the self, what that employee provides and receives. Next, we have the outside of the self. It is the employee's interactions with other organization. This is when the employee compares their output to the output of another employee with the same placement but on another organization or workplace. Then we have the others on the inside. These are the other employees in the individual's current workplace. This is when the employee compares their output to the output of a colleague inside their own organization. Lastly, we have the others outside. These are the people who are not affiliated with a specific group, but the employee still uses them to compare their output, as they seem to doing just fine even if they are not providing the same input as what the employee does. To easily understand these references, here is a sample situation. When a teacher or self inside the organization compares their to that of other teachers, others on the inside, in the same institution, the referent group are the colleagues of the teacher. Now the teacher uses their colleagues to compare his or her output to their output, and it can motivate or demotivate him or her, which will most likely happen if there is inequity in their inputs and outputs. Another example is when the referent group is other outside, like the employees from another organization, and when they compare themselves to other teachers they know socially. Lastly, the referent group of self outside is when the teacher compare themselves to what they earned in their former work. It happens when the employee compares themselves to their previous work and starts to realize the inequity to their inputs and outputs. Take note that these comparisons to the reference can motivate or demotivate the employee, as they will always base it on their input and their output. Now, how can the equity theory be applied to personnel management? First off, the supervisor must listen and keep an open line to the concerns of their employees. Open communication is the key, as it is used by the supervisors to measure their employees' inputs and outputs and decide whether they need to be compensated more depending on their outputs, or they should be paid less depending on their input. For example, a pregnant teacher may be willing to accept lower pay output in exchange for more flexible working hours input. Next, the inputs and outputs are assigned personal values by different personnel. For example, two teachers with the same level of experience and qualifications but were not performing the same inputs for their job input may not be equally compensated outputs. Also, the supervisors can change the payroll depending on the conditions experienced by their employees. For example, a teacher assigned in the city may accept a lower pay than a colleague that is assigned to a less developed area. But lastly, balancing salary and benefits is a must, because excessive pay can be demotivating for others. This will likely occur if an employee is paid more than his/her colleagues with the same position and skill set. As we conclude this talk, we can summarize that the equity theory is all about the balance in input and output of an employee. Comparisons to input and output can be helpful or demotivating to the employees, but if the theory of equity is used properly, it can motivate and keep your employees happy.